Hello and welcome to the Pacific Center podcast. My name is Jack Miller. The focus of this podcast will be the intersection of traditional healthcare practices of various cultures and the modern scientific research on peak physical and cognitive performance. This show will be delivered in an interview format. While we will be discussing some medical issues and treatments today, we will in no way be providing medical advice. As always, for any health-related issues and conditions, you seek appropriate medical care and advice from a healthcare professional, preferably your local acupuncturist. Can you play that back? See how it sounded?
Oh, I can't actually play it back until afterwards.
Okay, no problem.
I'll clean it up. It will sound good. Good.
That's all right. So let me give you the Jill Blakeway intro. Anytime?
Yeah.
Okay. Jill Blakeway is a practitioner of Chinese medicine and the founder of the Unova Center in New York City. She's the author of 2 popular books on women's health, Making Babies, and Sex Again, and is the host of CBS Radio's weekly podcast, Grow, Cook, Heal. She taught gynecology and obstetrics in the doctoral program at Pacific College of Oriental Medicine in San Diego and Chicago. Jill also founded the inpatient acupuncture program at the Lutheran Medical Center in Brooklyn, New York, and her research has been published in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine. She was the first acupuncturist to give a TED Talk at TED Global in 2012. Her newest book is Energy Medicine, The Science and Mystery of Healing. Welcome to our podcast, Jill. It's nice to see you through the technology of teleconferencing. I guess I didn't need that last line. Does that screw things up? Can you just cut that?
Oh, no.
This one? Okay.
Too warm in here for you?
No, I kind of prefer it warm, but a little bit of water would be good. Thanks, man.
Sure, my phone's on silent.
Yeah, me too.
Oh.
Oh, there's Jeff.
There's who? Oh, hey, Jim.
Hello.
Let's see. Let me get my headphones on.
Hi, it's good to see you.
You too.
It's so clever to be able to do this, don't you think?
Yeah, it's great. It's
Yeah,
really, it's
awesome.
really changed our educational model, as you know, from the transitional doctorate.
Yeah, no, I bet. It's awesome.
Yeah. Are you in New York?
Changed my book tour, as you can imagine. I do a great ton of it from my living room.
Oh, yeah, that's
Right.
it was a lot better than getting on an airplane.
It's a lot better.
Yeah, for sure. All
Yeah.
right. Are you in New York?
I am, yeah.
In the city or upstate?
No, I'm in the city. Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So I've already recorded intro to the podcast and an introduction of you. They'll just paste it in afterward. So we can
Yes.
just kind of jump into things. Do you have any
Great.
kind of time constraint?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't. I'm happy. I have the afternoon.
Okay. Well, we'll just see how it goes then. So what I'd like to do, in addition to weaving in a discussion of your books, is to try to get to some sort of essence of what has made you successful, right? So much of our podcasts are aimed at the peak performance, optimization of both physical and mental well-being. And we have been interviewing people to try to glean from them some wisdom in that regard, as well as obviously some tools of the trade of Chinese medicine. I think that most of our listeners are from Chinese medicine, but I think there are many that aren't as well that may want a general discussion. So we just kind of see where it goes.
Yeah.
As I kind of sent you some notes, I wanted to start by quoting someone that we both loved and respected so much, Alex Tabarry, who once told me that the first rule of Qigong is to have fun. And I think that's really applicable both to your work and your newest book, as well as to what we'll hopefully do today here. So hopefully we'll have some fun, move some Qi. As I came over here, I was thinking about some other questions, and I remembered one of our first symposium speakers, Dr. Tae-Woo Yu, a Korean man. I don't know if you know his work. He's well known for the Korean hand acupuncture system.
Yes.
And that's what he was speaking about at the symposium in 1989. But we had a panel on Qi, what is Qi? And we had Ted Kapchuk and Mikishima and a lot of other notables. And Tay was on that panel. And, I expected him to talk more about his hand acupuncture system. And he got up there and he goes, my hand acupuncture system, that's pretty interesting. He goes, but I'm really interested in healing at a distance now. And I went, okay, where's this going? So, but it was really interesting to see that concept was in your book, right? Both some of the healers that were working with patients, but also in the research, which I think was really probably the most remarkable a part of your book in a way. Obviously the stories, the actual phenomenon of energy healing is fantastic in its own right. But I think what you brought was a connection back to reason, back to science, things that we could use to verify some of the claims that are made by various healers. Maybe you could, I don't know, just kind of jump in and give me some of the stories about the most impressive experiences and the most interesting people that you met through your journeys to create this book.
Well, it was a lot of fun. You mentioned fun, and it was so much fun. And I hope that comes across in the book. HarperCollins gave me a commission that was just a dream, really. They sent me all around the world to look at healers and look at what they're doing, and then ask scientists to explain it, which is my passion anyway, bringing it all together. Because I realize we're all observing the same phenomena, and then we're translating it within our frame of reference, but it's all the same stuff. So I wanted to have a look at the science behind our connections and our healing connections. And you're right, there is science behind those connections. So for example, we are connected energetically when we're apart. And a good example of that was at the University of Connecticut. They put two people in separate MRIs, and when one thought healing thoughts about the other, their brainwaves began to sync, which I think is fascinating. It's kind of that feeling that I have when I think about a patient I haven't seen for a decade and they're on my schedule the next week, and clearly they were thinking about me. But we're connecting. And as you know from the book, what I did was then I wondered what happened in my body when I'm doing acupuncture. And so I had them put an EEG on my brain and measure the energy field around my brain, and an EKG on my heart, which measures the energy field of my heart. And we found that I was doing something with my vagus nerve that I had unconsciously trained myself to do, I think because I just wanted to help people. And what it meant was that my heart and my brain were going into resonance with each other, which means they were going at the same frequency. And to do that, I had to slow my brain down a lot. And I don't think I'm remotely special, Jack. So I think most experienced practitioners are in all probability doing that. I was just lucky enough to measure it. But what's really interesting is that the patient's heart then goes into resonance with mine. And that's not due to anything particularly woo. It's actually due to something called mirror neurons. When the patient feels safe and connected, they start to mirror me, not just physically, like calm down, but also they start to go at the same frequency. They mirror my frequency. And when they do that, I think that's when the magic happens, or part of when the magic happens in an acupuncture treatment. And so I was happy to have found a way of kind of measuring at least some of that magic. The book is called Energy Medicine, The Science and Mystery of Healing, because there's always a bit of mystery. Yeah. But I felt like we'd measured some of that intangible by being able to do that. And as I say, I think all practitioners are probably doing their own version of that.
Yeah. You hire a number of acupuncturists in your clinics. Are you encouraging them to do some of the practices in your book, or leaving it to their natural inclinations?
No, I have taught classes on this for my team, and they can all do it, which lends credence to my idea that most of us actually can, if not all of us. I'm a very energetic practitioner, and I run the practice on energetic lines. I believe that love is an expansive energy and fear is a contractive energy, and so the way I am in business and in life is the same as the way I am in the clinic, and so they kind of pick that up from me. I believe that patients heal when they feel safe. And if you remember in my book, and we'll probably get into me going to Japan, but Dr. Eric Pepper, the wonderfully named Dr. Pepper at San Francisco State, had sent me to Japan to look at various healers that he had done testing on. And one of the things he said that all the good healers he met had in common was that they created a place of safety in the clinic. And that was certainly true of those Japanese healers. They were, you could tell them anything. They were very kind. They were very non-judgmental. And that has been my experience in practice. Unova is a very kind, warm place to come to. And in the treatment room, I create a sense of safety. I don't judge my patients. I don't second guess their choices. I don't feel superior to them, because I'm not. I try and give them the impression that I'm in the trenches with them, because I am. I'm on my own journey, learning my own stuff. And I try and be that kind presence. And I think that permeates our whole clinic. In fact, when new front desk people arrive, there's usually a point where they get frustrated with something in their day. And someone who's been at Unova for a while goes, "Oh no, you can't be negative because Jill thinks it pollutes the energy." which is true. I do. I think you can tell a place that feels safe. I think if you walk into somewhere where there's been an argument and negativity, you can feel that argument and negativity. If you walk into a church, you can feel something, which I think is thousands of years of people being on their best behavior permeating the chi of the church. So the Unova Center is not that old, but our chi permeates it. And so I'm careful of the sense of safety we create, and I'm strict about it as the clinic director. Not that I need to be, they're all very nice people. And I think that's the most important part. But they are energetic practitioners, because acupuncturists are, and I do encourage them to play into or lean into that side of the practice.
Yeah, I think that's a very important skill to develop as a practitioner. We encourage the practitioners here to at least do a little bit of massage on the patients, to establish that connection. When I was at your clinic in New York, you also had the yang side of the chi, where you were saying that you wanted the clinic to be busy, that there should be activity at the clinic, and I got that to have that kind of prosperity. It was important to have the chi flowing through the business as well. So in addition to the yin side of the safety and the comfort and the calmness, there needs to be a certain motion there as well.
Yeah, I had the same accountant for 20 years, and he unfortunately died, and I'm kind of lost without him. He was very wise, and he used to always say to me, a business that isn't in transition is failing, which is a hard thing to say when you're, just trying to keep going.
Yeah.
But I've never forgotten it, because I think it's true. I think really what that means is that chi has to run through your business and through your practice. So, but we're always coming up with interesting things to keep it interesting for ourselves, but also exciting for the patients and to be lively. So it is a bit of a dichotomy, because we're a tranquil space, but we're a lively practice. Yesterday, I was at the Pop Sugar events, which had thousands of people in New York coming, and the Unova team were doing pulse diagnosis and ear seats for literally hundreds and hundreds of people. They looked so tired, my team, by the end of it. We had baby yoga in our Brooklyn office this week, mummy and baby yoga. We're constantly updating our social media. Our blog gets updated all the time. And I think what that is, it gives the public the impression that we're engaged and alive and want to serve them and are excited and happy about what we do. But it also moves chi through the practice sort of endlessly, so that we're always in transition. We're always learning, we're always growing, we're always trying something else. I'm off to a chocolate factory this week, like Willy Wonka, because we just designed some PMS chocolate, vegan, sugar-free PMS chocolate. And I get to go and see the first bars come off the whatever the machine is, I don't even know. It's
going to be Unova chocolate bars?
Yeah, Unova PMS chocolate. And it's really, do I think we're going to make a lot of money out of Unova PMS chocolate? I don't know. It wasn't my major motivator. My motivator was, oh my God, that's so fun. Let's have Unova PMS chocolate. Let's give it to the press. Let's have a launch. Let's just keep it exciting. And if it works, we'll do anxiety chocolate.
Chinese herbs in the chocolate?
Yeah.
Or?
Yes, I designed the herbal formula, and a very wonderful chef here, a natural chef in New York, designed a chocolate made with coconut oil and monk fruit rather than sugar and milk fat. And I tasted the prototypes. We actually had some made for the press launch of my book, I think, which we did at our Brooklyn office, and they were pretty good. So we thought, well, that's it. We'll go into the chocolate business.
All right.
But really, it's just me trying to keep things moving and alive and exciting for everybody, for the team, for the patients, and for me.
Did you start out wanting to be a writer, or was that part of your kind of bigger plan to build a brand, to build your clinic? Is it part of that, moving the chi, or was it an early interest?
Well, people never believe me when I say this, but this is true. I never had a big plan. And I always joke, the plan is not to have a plan, people. see where we're moved. But I actually do believe that there is an intelligence in the universe. There is source energy. And when you're in line with it, the next part of your path opens up. And actually, when you start to get blocked, if you look at where you're out of alignment, you can usually troubleshoot it and find what I like to call the next delicious step, the next delicious movement in your life. So I really did that. And as you know from reading the book, which is partly memoir, I got stuck here and there. And I needed help, a mentorship. So I didn't really have a plan, but I love to write because I love to communicate. The same thing that makes me a good practitioner, I think. You know, I want to communicate this beautiful medicine to the patients. And writing is one way of doing that. So I was blogging from 2005. And every week, and my husband used to tease me, Noah, who is an acupuncturist, who I met at Pacific College, Jack.
Yes, I know. We're taking full credit for that relationship.
Many years ago, over 20 years ago.
My goodness.
He would say, you do know you're blogging into the ether, don't you, Jill? Literally nobody is reading your blog. And then one day, someone had read my blog, and I was so excited. And then I realized it was Noah taking pity on me reading my blog. But now we have a huge blog archive and it's still relevant and current. And so I always tell people, blog into the ether, start writing, start communicating about this beautiful medicine to your public, your community, and build it and they will come eventually.
Yeah, I think that's great advice for our alum and our grads. You do need to put yourself out there. In fact, in your book, you were really quite revealing in terms of some of the personal stories, your early childhood, your relationship with your mother. Was that difficult for you? Did you have second thoughts about its place in the book?
Yes, I did. I think if you write memoir, you should be honest. You know, you have to have integrity anyway. And I realized it was part of what had made me the kind of practitioner I am. You know, my great wish for people to be safe comes from being unsafe as a child and wanting to give people something I didn't have, I think, in retrospect. But I agonized over it and I rewrote those sections numerous times. I consulted with my editor because I wanted to be kind to my mum in the same way I'm kind to my patients. Yeah, I wanted to, I understood her journey. I understood why she was the way she was. She was mentally ill. She was young when she had me. She was very overwhelmed and she was somewhat abusive, but she had also been abused. So I tried to tell her story with some compassion. And I hope that came across. It was sort of agonizing actually, because I didn't want to betray her.
Yeah, I think it did. I think it was both touching and relevant, because as you said, it did develop, or the experience led to some of the sensitivity that you now display. So I think it was important, and I think in any, as you said, in any memoir or any successful story, when it's personalized, it becomes more compelling, more powerful. So I think it did work quite well in the book.
I also felt when I was writing the book, Jack, that there was a lot of science I wanted to get across to a non-sciencey audience.
Yeah.
And so memoir and story and anecdote helped me kind of weave that through in a way so that it wasn't so burdensome, because I wanted people to really understand the physics and the science behind our connection. And that's difficult, I think. So I just kept weaving it. You know, when I thought it got a bit bogged down, I went back to memoir.
Yeah, it was really a perfect balance, I must say. And I'm not just saying this. I really enjoyed it. I did find it to be, like I said, a perfect balance between the science and the story. The science was not overwhelming, but yet the bibliography, I think, is a treasure trove. And I think our students, our alum, and anybody listening who has an interest in pursuing the subject further is a perfect place to start. I must say, Dr. William Bankston was quite a character in your book. I mean, from the beginning to the end, he appears, and the stories related to him are really fascinating. I mean, starting with the the hands-on healing that he was exposed to. But yet, I mean, I really appreciate his skepticism, because again, as a scientist, he's able to bring more credibility by doing research which demonstrates the results. His experiments with the lab animals and cancer is just, I mean, really, it's quite, it's beyond fascinating. It's really astounding. Just for people listening, they exposed lab rats to cancer cells that were 100% fatal. Within 14 to 27 days, every lab animal is expected to die. But they did hands-on healing with these animals, and all of them in the experimental group survived. And then it gets crazier when they repeated the experiments, and the control groups in the same room started to have good results as well. And that persisted until they moved the control group well out of the building. Then those didn't get the benefits of the hands-on healing. So, I mean, what an incredible story. I'm surprised that it's not more well known. What's a little bit of his backstory, and how did you come to meet him?
I met Bill about a decade ago, I think now, and he had a big influence on me because his science is good science.
Yeah.
And I met him because I was conducting some research into hands-on healing in a hospital, and I wanted some advice on how to structure that study. And Bill is an obvious person to go to. And you're absolutely right. His backstory is that he learned a hands-on healing technique from a psychic healer who was quite a character himself. And he was going to test the psychic healer in the lab, a bit like I was going to do myself in the hospital. And they bought the mice. They're mice that are specially bred to have cancer. And you're absolutely right. They do reliably die by day 27, poor mice. And the guy pulled out. So Bill did it himself. He used the technique. And to his amazement, the mice got better. They healed themselves in response to this technique. And what's more, when they were re-injected with cancer, they couldn't get it. Their immune systems were forever changed. And then Bill did what a good scientist would do. He wondered if this was replicable. And so he got a load of skeptical students who didn't even know why they were doing this experiment. They thought they were taking part in an experiment into gullibility, which I'm sure they believed. And he taught them the technique, and all of them could heal the mice too. And good science must be replicable. We have to build on each other's discoveries as we sort of expand our knowledge base. So there's limited value in studying a special someone somewhere, although there is some value. What's valuable is studying a technique that can be used by anyone and has reliable results. And they have done, this is at City University, these experiments, they've done them on thousands of mice now, and reliably with the occasional, occasionally a mouse dies, but mostly it cures the mice of cancer. And you're absolutely right, the control group. What really happened, Jack, was that at some point the mice look worse before they get better, and it's quite scary. And at some point, everybody freaked out. The students, Bill, no matter who was taking part in the early days in these experiments, they freaked out, and they went to look at the control mice to see if they looked bad too. And when they looked at the control mice, who were mice who'd been given cancer but weren't having hands-on healing, they looped them into what is called a meaning field. That's a term coined by a man called Immense Barousse from King's College in London. But with their minds, they looped them into a meaning field. And when they realized, and the mice got better, the control mice. So when they realized that, they sent the control mice to a different lab when nobody could look at them, and then they reliably died. And Bill thinks that that may be part of the explanation for why the placebo effect is getting stronger. As you know, it's getting harder and harder to test drugs because the placebo effect is getting stronger and stronger, which is interesting. And it may be that the placebo drug is being looped into a meaning field with the active drug. and therefore is energetically picking up some of its qualities. That's pretty out there, but the science suggests that that may well be true, which I think is extraordinary. So Bill has had a big effect on me because he's just a scientist. And I don't know whether you remember this bit of the book, but then he realized that he could probably, that this is what he's creating is information carried by a frequency. And they realized they could put the frequency into anything. So they, at Brown University, they put it into cell medium, and then they put human cancerous tissue in the cell medium. And when I wrote the book, it had made 9 genetic changes measurably in the human cancerous tissue. It was, again, breast cancer tissue, tumor tissue. And when I had my book launch, which was on April 2nd, 2019, it had made 37 genetic changes. Bill was at my book launch, so he was able to update us on that research, which is still ongoing. So fascinating.
I mean, and then he was also involved in the random event generator research as well, wasn't he?
He wasn't, but he introduced me to them.
Oh, okay.
They're fascinating too. I met Dr. Robert Jean through Bill. Okay. He has since died. He was in his 90s when I met him. But he, when I met him, was the Dean Emeritus of the Engineering Department at Princeton. And for many, many years, he was the Dean of the Engineering Department at Princeton, which I imagine is the least woo department at Princeton, don't you? The Engineering Department, they're a pretty solid lot. I would have thought, not given to flights of fancy. But Dr. Jean had an extraordinary experience. He had a grad student, a female grad student, who had wondered if, as a project, she could create a machine that could be changed with the human mind. And I don't think Dr. Jean for a moment thought that she could pull this off. But, and you are the president of a school, you know this feeling. He was like, well, she should try. It'll be a nice little project for her. It'll be interesting to see her think it through, et cetera, et cetera. So she was allowed to do this project as part of her graduate studies. And of course, she did pull it off. And what she created was what you referred to, the random event generator, which, thanks to decaying atomic material, is a machine that produces random numbers. And what she found was that when one person, but more importantly, when lots of people, this effect got stronger, but when people focused on the machine with intention and feeling, the numbers became less random. And the more people, the more the numbers came into line, which is interesting. And if the people were particularly connected with each other, like a couple or something like that, they had a more powerful effect. And so to give you an example, on September the 11th, by then, Princeton had set up a lab called the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, the PAIR Lab. And they had sent these random event generators to universities all over the world, and they were just spitting out random numbers back to Princeton over the internet, and they were collating the information. And 4 hours before the planes hit the Twin Towers, the numbers started to come into line all over the world in a way that is statistically impossible. And that went on for the rest of that day. And people always ask me why 4 hours before, and I ask them that too. And nobody really knows. They think it may speak to a sort of communal premonition, or it may be because the actual events were already taking place, in so much as the people who were going to commit these terrible events were already getting on planes and at airports, and, you know, it was already happening. Or it may be that time isn't particularly linear. But for whatever reason, when we all looked in the same direction on September the 11th, all over the world, these numbers came into sequence. And they now have little portable random event generators. This work is still going on, and people listening can look it up. It's now run by someone called the Global Consciousness Project. A man called Roger Nelson, who was part of that original PAIR team, has taken on the research. And they take their little portable random event generators to churches and yoga retreats and the Trump inaugural and all sorts of things. And what they've found is that when we bond together through love, we bring the machine more into sequence. And unfortunately, when we bond together through fear too, fear is a strong bonder. And we're seeing that in this country at the moment. We're seeing that all over the world, that fear and cruelty bond people as well as love and kindness and expansion. And so we have to be careful what we feel, I think, and how we bond to people.
It's a reminder to make sure that we do our meditations in the morning so that our emotions are balanced and more informed by love than fear. And what that research did for me as a general skeptic, I think it's fair to say, is it encourages open-mindedness, which I think is certainly a positive trait that we should all have. But it's like open-minded, but what you bring into your book, but show me.
Yes.
Right? So not just any kind of anecdotal claim. Again, I think the book does a really nice job with that and provides a great resource for anybody who is interested in pursuing it further. And the random event generator is probably the most out there. I was joking with my staff, and I said that Jill found the next planet in her book, but she also provided a pathway back to Earth through the science.
Well, I wanted to find things that were measurable. And in the book, I say, my conclusion, and you'll have to read the book, people watching at home and listening at home, and come up with your own conclusion. But my conclusion was that we are, to a certain extent, in silent collaboration with each other. And those things can be measured. There are research studies that I cite in the book that show that an interviewer interviewing someone, a bit like you and I are doing now, starts to register the heart waves of the interviewee in their brain waves. Mm-hmm. So we are affecting each other with frequency. And that has implications for how we are in the world. It obviously has implications for those of us who are acupuncturists and are practicing an energy, one of the oldest forms of energy medicine ever. So I think that's worth noting for us. One
of the things that I find very plausible, in fact, it's demonstrated in your book and many other places, is the idea of resonance, the synchronization, let's say, of our brain waves or heart waves, our beat. That doesn't seem too far out to me. But when we talk about measurement, what I haven't seen yet is the measurement of the causative of the causative factor, right? It's like, what is there? Is there an energy being transmitted? Is there, what is it that's creating that, right? To see the effect is pretty apparent, but to see the mechanism isn't so. And yet science has so many tools that measure such fine effects. Now they're detecting gravitational waves that are like zillion light years away, and yet, are we yet able to measure these causative factors for the resonance or the synchronization that we might experience among people?
I think we don't quite know what we're looking for. And so we don't know how to find it. I think that's what it is. So I looked at experiments that, you're quite right, measured the effect, like the mouse experiments that Bill did in the lab. They have a clear effect. And we know something about how that works. We know it affects the immune system. Bill, when he's talking about it at its most simple, says it reminds the cell of what it is. And it comes back into order, which I think is interesting. But how does it do that? We know that it's a frequency. We know that frequencies can be measured, just like mine were of my brain and my heart, but also Qigong masters, when they use a magnetometer and they measure the frequency coming out of their hands, it's 1,000 times stronger than what is normally the strongest frequency in the body, which is the heart. So we're able to measure that. We know it's a low frequency. And we know that low frequencies heal. Some of the best orthopedic hospitals in the world use low frequency electricity to heal broken bones and soft tissue.
Sure.
That research was done here in New York, actually, at Columbia University, and now is pretty widespread. Now, interestingly, that is the same frequency that Reiki practitioners produce. And so we're seeing clues everywhere. We know, and I actually didn't put this research in the book, although it is footnoted in the book, but I didn't draw people's attention to it. Bill's brain, when he is doing his technique on the mice, produces a frequency that is 7.86, which is the Schumann resonance, which is the frequency of the earth, which I didn't get into in the book because I was already overwhelmed with information. I had enough information for 3 books, and I was like, oh, I can't get into the earth's frequency right now. But how fascinating is that? The earth has a frequency. It's caused by, at any given time, there are about 2,000 thunderstorms going on around the planet, and they create a low frequency, which then moves around the planet at 7.86. And that's the Schumann's, it's called the Schumann's resonance. And that isn't something woo, that's measurable.
Mm-hmm.
But Bill's brain goes at the same frequency. So I think we're seeing clues that it's frequency. Bill doesn't like to call it energy because he thinks that energy, well, the definition of energy in science, one of the definitions of energy is that it dissipates over a distance, and this doesn't appear to. So he calls it information carried by a frequency created by a bond, a resonant bond. And I think that's as far as we've got, or at least as far as I got in my book. But I'm plowing on. I think I'm going to write another book, so who knows where I'll go.
To that. Okay, that sounds good. As you traveled, and particularly the people that you met in Japan, did you? They really had varying lifestyles, and I wondered, the people that you met, did they seem to have a natural talent for healing, and then did they do any particular work to develop it further? To practice a qigong, any kind of dietary regimens. Was there any commonality that you found with them, or was it really individual?
There was some commonality. They had both worked. I looked at 2 healers in Japan, and you're right, they were very different, both as people and in their healing techniques. But they had both worked very, very hard to become as skilled as they were, and they took it extremely seriously. The first healer I went to see was a monk called Hiroyuki Abe, and he was quite gregarious. He was kind of a party monk, and he drank and he smoked, and he was a lot of fun. And I had trouble keeping up with him. And and Noah, my husband, came with me too. And we spent, he was always surrounded by lots of people, lots of students. He wasn't particularly solitary. He was a very sociable person. But in the clinic, he took his job very seriously. He created a big sense of safety. And he told me that he had studied really hard. His backstory, though, was interesting in so much as he told me that he was getting a divorce, and he went to tell his mother that he was divorcing, and he was in his, I think, late 20s. He's in his sort of early 60s now, and he was giving her the bad news, and he saw the goddess of mercy in the corner of the room. And I said to him, "Did you tell your mother that you saw the goddess of mercy?" And he said, "Oh no, I'd already given her enough bad news," which was logical. And this made me laugh. He said that the goddess of mercy stayed with him after that, and she was pretty rough. She was like, for the goddess of mercy, ironically, he described her as old school. He said she was very bossy and old school, and she made him study really hard. And anyway, so he studied physiology, and she taught him to heal. And when I asked Dr. Pepper back at San Francisco State what we should make of the goddess of mercy teaching Hiroyuki Abe to heal, he explained that people kind of create an avatar and see, they anthropomorphize this energy, and they sort of see what's in their experience. He was a Shinto monk, so he saw the goddess of mercy. I've talked to Catholic healers who see angels, and I've talked to people who see Kuan Yin and things like that. I think they're probably all seeing the same energy or a similar form of energy, and then creating something in their mind to make that accessible. Although I could be wrong about that, and Hiroyuki Abe could be chatting specifically to the goddess of mercy for all I know. But that's his backstory. And he did something that I recognized as an acupuncturist in clinic. He was putting chi into the acupuncture points. And at one point, he had me needle a point for frozen shoulder on a patient with frozen shoulder. And you're an acupuncturist, so you know the point for frozen shoulder is on the lower leg. And I put that point in, and then he put his hand over my hand on the needle. And the amount of energy he was running through my hand and into the needle was shocking. And I realized, oh, I'm a baby. I have so much work to do. And he'd worked very hard to get to that point. And then the other guy, Master Kawakami, was a yogi, a very disciplined yogi. Now, he was not drinking and smoking. He was getting up at 4 and meditating and lifting weights. He had been Mr. Japan, like weightlifting in 1979, and then decided to focus on his insides rather than his outsides. And he was an extremely disciplined practitioner of yoga. And he was able to expand his consciousness through meditation in ways that were very profound. He, was extremely psychic. He seemed almost magical to me. And he was in his, I think he's almost 80. And out of everybody, he was the person I most wanted to go back and study with. He was on an island off the south coast of Japan, and I will eventually get back. And I said to him, Sifu, I want to come and study with you. Can I come and study? And he said, oh, you don't need to hurry. I'm going to live till I'm 120. And I thought, well, I actually kind of believe him. He'll outlive us all, will Master Kawakami. Right. But he was a different type of healer altogether. But they were disciplined in their own way.
So with Abe the monk, as he's generating chi on the acupuncture point, would he explain it as acting as a conduit for a more universal energy, or is he generating it internally?
No, although there is a lot of internal chi generation involved in acting as a conduit, funnily enough. If your chi is your body's intelligence, part of what Qigong masters do is develop their chi in order to be that open and be able to resonate like that. So, but no, he was bringing it from outside. Or his perception was that he was bringing it from outside. And he would, I have video that when we get together, Jack, I'll have to show you, but he would click his fingers and touch and poke. And I began to get a sense of what he was channeling, because on my last day with him, and I tell this story at the end of my book, but he said to me, would you like me to open your chakras? And as a Westerner, I took this rather lightly, which I regretted. I was like, sure, you can open my chakras. But it was a huge deal, and his students were completely shocked, because normally people study with him for a long time before he opens those chakras, and it's a big deal. And he opened my chakras. I shut my eyes. I was sitting down, and I could feel pulling inside my body. I knew where his hands were. I could feel it inside. It was a very strange feeling, and I have video of this. Noah took video while all this was going on. And then I opened my eyes, and I saw the world differently, is all I can tell you. I was in a room full of his students, and suddenly, instead of being solid, I could see the light emanating from them. They looked like movement, like light, and they looked like energy condensed into matter, which is what I'd written about in my whole book, but been quite theoretical about. And I could see their beautiful light and the way it connected us. And in the book, that takes me into a discussion of biophotons, because we do have light in every cell. And interestingly, in cancer cells, that light dissipates, it diminishes, or if not, goes out altogether. So not that I know whether I was seeing biophotons or not. And I adjusted finally I stopped seeing everybody as light, but I never quite went back to seeing everybody the same way again, is all I can tell you. It had more of a profound effect on me than all the thinking I did while I wrote this book, and I did a lot of thinking, and I'm a heady kind of person anyway. But that physical experience probably affected me more than anything, and how I am in the world. And it gave me a trust and a sense of safety that I had not had before I experienced that.
He was also the gentleman that put your heart back into sync, right? You have a tachycardia attack.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I have Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome, which means I have a genetic heart defect. I like to, it means I have an extra layer of conductive cells in my heart. So I like to say I have extra heart chi. But the truth is, it's always given me trouble. I have bouts of tachycardia. They can get horrible. I end up having to go to hospital, and they have to stop my heart with a drug called adenosine. And it's been a problem. And it seemed to be exacerbated by what I was doing in clinic. Something about the way I was modulating my autonomic nervous system in order to go into the same frequency. I was using my vagus nerve in some way, and I wasn't necessarily skilled or trained. I trained myself, and I would set off this tachycardia that results from the Wolff-Parkinson-White. And it was actually the day he had opened my chakras. We went to a shabu-shabu restaurant in Kobe, and it was hot. You know, shabu-shabu is you have a pot and it's bubbling and everybody throws things into the pot, and people were drinking beer and they were getting rowdy, and some people were smoking, which people do in restaurants in Japan. And I started to feel quite lightheaded, and then my heart started to race. And normally I would have to go I can sometimes stop it with Valsalva maneuvers, like rubbing my carotid and things, but normally it ends up with me in an emergency room. So I was starting to panic. And Hiroyuki Abe asked my husband what was up with me, and he told him, and he leaned over the shabu-shabu pot and he pointed two fingers like a gun at my heart, and I felt it. And my heart went back into rhythm. Just boom. And my heart never goes back into rhythm like that. I've had this many times, and it always just slows down over time, and unless they give me adenosine, in which case they shock it back into rhythm. But I never had that happen at all. And it was the last time my heart did that. And that was 2 years ago now, almost. And that was that, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's great. It was a good party for you to be at.
Yeah, he's a useful man to know.
I'll say.
To the United States, actually, so I will keep everybody posted. But he's a good man.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. In fact, in the beginning of your book, you talked about early in your experience of energy healing in your clinic that it seemed like your symptoms were exacerbated by actually achieving this resonance. You were also exacerbating the symptoms of your syndrome. And was it, again, was your body unprepared for that alignment or that experience, or is it just that you have that condition and so it's you're somewhat at risk for or having symptoms when you're in this resonant state?
I think it's a bit of both. I struggled about whether to put that in because I didn't want to frighten people, because I think I was a bit of a unique case because I have this unstable heart rhythm. But I did put it in because A, it's the truth, and B, I think it gives us a clue as to what we're doing. Yeah, because I think for me, it made me understand that I was modulating between my parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system via the vagus nerve in order to achieve this resonance. And I was doing it through the breath, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I was kind of, I don't even know why I started to do it. I think I felt an energy coming out of my hands. The patients could feel it. And then I sort of taught myself what would make it stronger and what would make it less. And to start with, I wasn't very good at it, I think. My body wasn't trained. And so occasionally we'd have a mishap in the clinic and I would get tachycardic, which is, never a good look in front of your patients. And, but I sort of learnt I worked my way through that, and clearly it didn't kill me. So all is well. But I do think I was a bit of a special case. So I don't think people need to be too worried about it unless they have a heart defect like me. I already had an electrical issue with my heart. But I also found things, Jack, like if I got too ego invested, the energy would dissipate. So if I started to want to prove in any way, even if I just wanted to help the patient too much, if I started to direct it, it would get less. So if I started to think, oh, please let this patient get pregnant, which is my ego making it much smaller, you know, the whole experience in some ways, it would get less, which I think is also significant. Some letting go of your ego's wish to control is part of this, and was common amongst most of the healers I looked at.
Yeah, and I think that came through really clearly, particularly in again, Dr. Bengston's work of his rapid imagery cycling, where you really are intentionally distracting your intentions really for the patient by focusing on, I found this very refreshing, frankly, that he wanted you to create, or trained you to create 20 very, very positive personal images. Really what we would call selfish things, right? I mean, your first one was a house on a beach, right? I mean, I think that's everybody's first one, right? And then you have, and so you cycle through these images while you're doing the hands-on work, so that you're not, you know, just like you said, either your ego's involved or you're praying so hard for this person to get better. It's really letting the energy flow through you.
Yes, that's exactly it. And Dr. Bengston does teach the technique, and I give it in the book, actually. He very generously just let me write it all out in the book so that people can teach themselves to do this. I did his course and learned it a weekend. It takes a while to practice it, but yes, he gets you to flash images of your kind of selfish wants, not your nice heartfelt wants like world peace and better government and stuff like that, but you're just like, I don't know, purses and beach houses, material wants and things like that. And then you flash them really quickly, and that appears to do two things. One, it projects you into the future a little bit, which is a place where the patient is healed already. And two, it stops your ego from interfering with whatever's going on, and it generates a measurable frequency that comes out of the left hand in the case of Bill's technique. And I have always done Qigong predominantly with my right hand, and so I remember when I took Bill's course, I was like, well, I'm a righty, so I'm not going to, you know, the energy will come out of my right hand. And he said, oh, no, I'll make you into a lefty, you'll see. And it was absolutely true. The energy comes out of, if you do Bill's technique, whatever it does to possibly the right side of your brain means the energy comes out of the left side of your hand. And when he puts both hands around the cages of the mice go to the left hand. And I've seen video of this. They know which hand is producing the energy that's good for them, and they actually push each other out of the way trying to get to it. And then when they're healed, they stop. They couldn't be bothered anymore. You know, he puts his hands up and they're just like, oh, hi, which is interesting.
Yeah, could you put those videos on your website?
Well, they're his videos, but I think he may have them on his website. I think they may be out there. But yes, they're his, and they're very cool. He tells me that he was once treating a child who had an eye disorder, and a very little toddler, and the toddler ran in and put his eye by Bill's left hand. So clearly, if you're instinctive rather than have, you know, a grown-up who's talked yourself out of a lot of things, you pick this up instinctively, just like the mice or a child.
I'm talking about instinctive healers. I think it was Carla Kreft, if I'm correct, who's actually worked with you at your clinic, right? Yeah. Is she still there?
She's not. She's roaming the world, is Carla. I believe she's in Italy at the moment. But I met Carla through someone you know well, Heiner Fruhoff.
Oh, sure.
Heiner told me that Carla was one of the brightest people he'd ever taught, and he told me, you should, you know, get her into your clinic. And so I did. I moved heaven and earth to get Carla into the clinic. She's a naturopath, super smart, very Western medical, but she comes from a long line of shaman. She comes from a long line of, she's Peruvian. Her grandma is still in the Amazon prescribing herbs. So she has two sides to herself. She's really my kind of girl, as you can imagine. She's very much a Unova girl. I look for people who are very scientifically literate at the Unova Center, because that's the world we live in, who have a bit of a mystical bend. And she was my kind of practitioner. And she was the first person to say to me, you do know that you don't need the needles, that you can do this with your hands. And I did kind of know, but I was sort of overwhelmed by the prospect of that. As you can imagine, because then I was like, well, I spent a lot of time becoming an acupuncturist. I'm licensed and it's credible, and why on earth would I give that up and move on to something that isn't licensed and is, you know, like the Wild West? But she was the person who recognized that I was having this experience where I was channeling more and more energy, and that it was coming through me.
So you're still using needles?
I am still using needles. What I realized is that Chinese medicine, and acupuncture in particular, is one of the oldest forms of energy medicine that's been continuously practiced. And it's the only form of energy medicine that is licensed and board certified. And that gives us all a degree of safety. It means that our fellow practitioners have reached a certain educational standard, and that they are bound by a code of ethics by their licensure. And I think that's a good thing. And I also feel that Chinese medicine gives me structure, diagnostic structure. It keeps me disciplined. It gives me a way of measuring patient progress, which I really appreciate. And we stand on the shoulders of giants. You know, we have all of that depth of experience going back thousands of years that we get to plow through and take from and learn from. And so it would be I think it would be utterly regrettable for me to turn my back on Chinese medicine. And what I did was it just deepened my practice in this way. So I practice a very energetic form of acupuncture, but I think a lot of practitioners do, even if they don't have words for it.
I mean, one of the things, just from a practical standpoint, is that while you might now be in a place where you could attract patients who would see you without needles, you know, as an energy healer, let's say, most people wouldn't, right? So the acupuncture is a great calling card. People are interested in what we do as acupuncturists, so they're willing to come and see us. And then that gives us an entree into doing any other techniques that we might have at our disposal. But it's the most recognizable form of energy healing, and people are willing to experience it. Where if I put up a shingle saying energy healer, you're probably not going to get as many patients.
I don't know then what level of healer you are. You could be anything really. You just can hang a shingle, whereas an acupuncturist has to be licensed. But I also, the needles, I've done this, you know, consistently for a long time, and I've always been a busy practitioner. So the needles are a part of me now. They feel like an extension of my chi. And it's very instinctive for me to do acupuncture, having done it over and over again. And as I say in the book, acupuncture works. And as you know, I have an entire chapter explaining the electromagnetics of acupuncture and why it conducts chi, or to the best of my ability, explaining why it conducts chi. And I still think it's one of the most profound systems of energy medicine there is, having gone all over the world and looked at some really amazing healers.
One of the favorite conversations I've had in my career was with Michael Smith, who's, you know, has since passed away. But Dr. Smith was always a big proponent of using big acupuncture points, right? You know, the ones that we all know, and put the needles in, get good chi, and then get out of the way. Right? He goes, acupuncture works. You don't have to, you know, hang around. And so that always gave me a great confidence in our medicine, because it doesn't rely on the particular talents that someone like you or Abe might have, right? I mean, while they're developing that, they can affect very good medicine by, you know, needling stomach 36 or N12, and, you know, go and have a cup of coffee.
Yes, well, you do. Well, you go on to the next patient if you're a busy practitioner.
Exactly.
But I believe it's important to give the patient some time on their own to rebalance their own energy field. And so I do get out of the way. I do some energy work over the needles, but then I give them a buzzer so they can call me if they need me. But I get out of the way and let them heal themselves in response to the prompts. And you're right, the big needle, the big points for a reason. I always tell my team that the big herbal formulas are big herbal formulas for a reason, and the big points are big points for a reason. And in the book, I explored their origins as part of embryology. You know, that they, if you lay over a map of the embryological staging posts, embryos have to communicate electromagnetically. They don't communicate through the blood or the nervous system. They create a polarity as a little staging post, and then they buzz off the next bit. And if you lay over a map of the major acupuncture points over those embryological centers, energy centers, they are exactly in the same place. So I think what was used to create us can be still used once we're here to regulate us, which is kind of interesting.
One of the ongoing conversations, I might even say debates in our field, is the phenomenon of De Qi, which you reference in your book and is very well known to acupuncturists and probably even now the general populace, and certainly people who've gotten acupuncture, particularly acupuncture of a certain type. Yet there are, and De Qi is the, for those who don't know, is the sensation of the Qi grabbing the needle. It's often a dull sensation, can actually be somewhat painful. It would be a little strong, but it's a very noticeable effect at the needle when we stimulate the needle. But yet there are acupuncturists who don't practice that style of needling and do very superficial style of needling with what we would say is without achieving the Qi sensation at the point. But yet they also get results. Do you have a particular preference in your practice, advice for practitioners regarding this particular concept?
Well, acupuncturists find different ways to affect Qi. And I always talk about that in my practice because I employ 18 acupuncturists and they all do it slightly differently. And I do not micromanage that. I think that acupuncturists develop their own relationship with Qi, and effective acupuncturists are effective acupuncturists, and they develop their own style. And I'm all for doing that. For me, it has always been important to get some Qi. I was influenced, and I wrote in the book about the work of Dr. Helen Langevin at the University of Vermont Medical School. And what she noticed was that there was a greater pull force at the acupuncture points, about just under 20% greater. And that when they did experiments on rat abdominal wall, and when the needle is stimulated, which is what we do to get Qi twisted, the fibers of connective tissue wrapped around the needle like spaghetti on a fork. Mm-hmm. And that increased its electroconductivity, mm-hmm. which I think I found compelling as research. And I think that twisting we do increases the electroconductivity of the acupuncture point. And then the transmission of that goes through connective tissue, through the fascia, which is very electroconductive. It has a high water content because it has a high collagen content. And so it conducts electric sensation deep into the body. So for me, it's been important to get Qi, but I have seen some extremely impressive Japanese style acupuncturists. And all I can think is that for them, they promote electroconductivity in a different way. Possibly more energetically and less mechanically.
Yeah, I was going to say that we've worked with Kiko Matsumoto, obviously, for a long time through the Pacific Symposium. And she talks about, a controversy in terms of the actual translation of the Qi, and that, the Qi needs to arrive at the point, and that it really can be the practitioner's Qi bringing the Qi to that point. And really then it really ties in with your energetic healing, the theme of your book. So, I mean, it can, as you say, we don't, in fact, we teach both methods at Pacific College, and tend to do kind of a hybrid, where it's not quite as strong a stimulation as a Chinese practitioner in China would utilize, but do generally expect some qi sensation. But then we also have a very popular Japanese acupuncture track and clinical experience as well. So I think I think you made that point that it is important for the practitioner to practice in a way that they find they're most comfortable, that they're getting the best results, rather than trying to practice in someone else's style.
Yeah, I think so. And I think back to Hiroyuki Abe when he put his energy down the needle. That was his energy affecting the point. It wasn't the mechanical twisting and making the point more electroconductive.
Yeah.
So we have options, as we always do in traditional Asian medicine.
Yeah.
We have options. We can increase the electroconductivity of the point mechanically, or we can use our qi on the point. And I think that might be what a lot of Japanese style practitioners are doing. And both work. And you know, people get good results, so I'm all for it.
Hey Jill, kind of just starting to maybe wrap things up a little bit here. I mentioned in my notes to you that we are developing what we're calling the Department of Professionalism at Pacific College, and it's really going to be analogous to our evidence-informed practice project, where we infused evidence-informed practice throughout the curriculum in many classes, to where students do adopt a habit of considering what the evidence is when they're doing their differential diagnosis and treatment. So that's become quite well implemented into the curriculum. And now what we're doing is trying to infuse professionalism throughout the curriculum, because it's been my contention that you need to have a certain character, I think, for lack of a better word, to be successful in the field. You have to be the kind of person that will engender trust from your patients. And that, for maybe many of our younger students, it takes time to develop. It's not, you know, practice building. Let's say we can offer a course in how to do insurance billing or web design or networking, whatever, but this more character development isn't something that you're going to just sit in a class for 14 or 40 hours and accomplish. And so I felt that the curriculum really from day one should have this theme, and where the faculty are role modeling and have a certain expectation of the students, whether it's something as simple as being on class on time, being in the clinic and being well kempt, practicing being well spoken. So there's all these types of things that will infuse the curriculum for 4 years, so that the student doesn't just graduate and go, oh, now I have to be a professional, right? Yeah. That they'll have used that opportunity for 4 years, and even not only develop those kind of what we would consider typical professional characteristics, but the compassion, the attentiveness to their patients, really the healing persona. So they'll have 4 years of that. So you've now been in practice for 20 plus years. What can you share to that department? If you were teaching our students, what would you tell them are the things that they need to be professional?
I'm so glad you're teaching that, incidentally. I think it's really, really important. There are a lot of things. One, and you touched on it, you do need to be reliable. So if you're at a place in your life where you're kind of coming and going and traveling a lot and things like that, it's hard to build a practice. So you may want to blog or do online coursework. It doesn't mean you can't use your degree just yet, and then you'll come back to practice. But a practice is a bit of a commitment. You know, you're there and you're a resource for your patients, and you have to show up every day, even if you don't have patients. I think I did when I started my practice. I showed up, I ran my business, I was there. Should anyone want to see me, I would have been there. That's how it built. So I think being reliable is really important. I think it's important to be able to communicate this medicine in a way that resonates with modern American patients. So spending some time working on how to language things that in a way that isn't alienating or scary, but gets across the point, I think is really important. And good case management is important. And good case management, what I do when I do an intake is I set short and long-term goals. And I move those through, we have electronic medical records, and I move that through the medical record with me, and I measure every week where I'm getting to. So in a fertility case, fertility being something I'm known for, the long-term goal may be a live birth, but the short-term goal is probably, a 28-day cycle, no spotting mid-cycle, no PMS, that kind of thing. And I share those short-term goals with the patient because we're kind of working on them together, yeah? That requires them to do things too. Mm-hmm. And then I troubleshoot. And in a fertility case, I use the period week to do that. And I go back over the last cycle with the patient, and we talk about what has worked and what hasn't. And I'm, totally honest about that. And I say, I was hoping you wouldn't have PMS by now. So I'm going to change this, and perhaps you could up your exercise here, or, it then becomes a conversation between us. And we're kind of in the trenches troubleshooting this thing together. And I look ahead in the case at all times, and these days I'm in and out of clinic. And so my cases are often picked up by other, for acupuncturists, and I leave them notes. Like, when this patient gets a regular cycle, I'm then going to give them this as a follicular formula, or, I have a plan for where we're going. So I'm assessing as we go, and that just is experience, I think. And I also know where I'm going. And one of the things I notice is, because I employ a lot of acupuncturists, and they're all awesome, but some of my team have been with me for 10 years, and they were acupuncturists for 10 years before that, and they're very solid in what they do, and they just sound authoritative. If you've done it a long time, you do know what you're doing. And I noticed that they get more compliance out of patients, and it's because it's harder to argue with them. They just sound authoritative, not bossy, kind, but solid, like, do this and this will happen. And that, I think, comes with experience, but it's what I try and teach my younger colleagues is, you need to sound authoritative. If you say you can take these herbs if you want to, they probably won't want to. But if you say, you take these herbs, I'll see you next week, what I'm expecting they'll do is blah, blah, and blah, blah, and blah, blah, and then we'll assess when we see each other, and where we're going is here. And I'd like to see you once a week for at least 8 weeks, and then we'll reassess. There's something about that plan that feels very soothing to everybody. That gives the patient a degree of confidence, I think. And the other thing I always tell my staff is, when people are better, let them go. People don't necessarily know they're better till you tell them for some reason, and they become very attached to you. But the point isn't to keep people dependent on you. Your best adverts are the people who are out there feeling well, telling everybody, oh, my acupuncturist was amazing. I used to have back pain, but I don't anymore. And so I do compete with people, and I do that, hopefully they come and I say, look, I don't think we need to see each other every week anymore. And if they say, oh my God, but I love this, I might say, well, you're welcome to come and we can work on other things, or maybe you could come once a month. But mostly, ideally, I like to, and I learned this from Alex Tiberi, I like to see them 4 times a year at the change of the season. So I send people back into the world and I say, come and see me 4 times a year unless you need me, in which case I'm right here. And that gives me, it's a bit like a GP doing an annual physical. That gives me a chance to take a look at the patient holistically 4 times a year and see the things that are sliding out. It also reminds the patient to come and see me when something's going wrong. rather than eventually remember when things have gone badly awry. And hopefully we can sort of head things off early that way. And so that is how I run it. And that is what has worked for me and worked for my team. And the other thing that, you see, I have a lot to say about this because I've just done this a long time. The other thing that I think young practitioners need to learn, and you may as well learn it in school, is how to do volume calmly and efficiently where you can. Now, some people complicate it and they need a lot of time, and that's, it is what it is. But a lot of what we do is pretty straightforward, actually, for us. We know what we're doing and we can get there pretty easily. And there is some skill involved in having several rooms going at once and not looking like you're running around sort of, you know, as if the barn is burning, because you're not. And being calm and measured and making sure that people feel heard, but moving things along in a way. And I think that takes some skill. I can see 4 an hour easily. But I don't. I see 3 now because I'm old and I'm a bit tired, and and I have other responsibilities. But you should be able to do a bit of volume, and that helps your bottom line. That helps you feed yourself and pay all your bills if you can. And it's not as hard as you would think. And people are often shocked when they first come to us. But we make everything at Unova really simple. You know, we have electronic medical records, we have a really efficient front desk, we have a very smooth, we have ergonomically designed rooms these days that were designed by architects specifically. So we're making everything smooth for ourselves, and we're staying calm, but we're seeing a reasonable amount of people. And the patients have no idea, and I know this because one of my colleagues, Anne Brun, who is a Pacific New York graduate, who's an awesome acupuncturist, was once treating a patient, and the patient said to her, "What do you do when you leave me? Do you sit outside and meditate about me?" Which is a lovely thought. But of course, quite what poor Anne was doing, because she's going on to the next person. But the fact that she was giving her that impression, that she was so calm and centered that the patient assumed she was just sitting outside the door meditating, is a lovely thought. I wish.
Thank you so much for those words of wisdom. I hope all of the students, and in fact, any acupuncturists that are, in fact, any healers, you know, there are many chiropractors or naturopaths that could also, who are building their practices, would benefit from that advice. Hey, just a personal curiosity before we say goodbye. Last time we talked, I think you were growing your practice quite a bit and expanding your sites. What's going on with your clinic?
Yes, we did. We took on investment, and which was a big step for me because I owned 100% of Unova and I sold 25% of it. And we opened a new clinic in Brooklyn, which is run by another Pacific College New York graduate, Dr. Christopher Peacock, who is awesome. And he has a wonderful team over there. And they're creating something different to our Flatiron. Since you came to visit us, Jack, we've moved our flagship to 17th and 5th Avenue. We had a brand refresh. We have a lovely new website. We kept things exciting for ourselves. As I said, a business is in transition, it's failing. So our Flatiron flagship is very busy, although smooth and calm, but it's we're treating a lot of patients. In Brooklyn, we're creating more of a community resource. We have a classroom space. We're planning to provide childcare so moms can come in and leave their little ones with a babysitter while they have their treatments. It's a different kind of atmosphere. We're already building the next one, which is on 58th Street and 3rd Avenue, and that one opens relatively soon, within a couple of months. That's already being built out, and then I think we'll breathe. I expect we'll take a big breath, and that'll be it for the year. And then next year, we will probably open another one in New York, and then I think we'd like to look at expanding, maybe coming back to California. There's a bit of me that's a California girl at heart, so maybe LA. I've been going backwards and forwards quite a bit with this book. There's been a lot of interest in my book in LA, so maybe we'll do that. But as I said at the beginning of this, it has to be in alignment for everyone. It has to be a kind of win-win, and there is a next delicious step, and you know it when it shows up. And Brooklyn was our next delicious step.
Yeah.
Christopher was the perfect person to run it, and it's going beautifully because it's in alignment. And then we'll take our next delicious step, and we'll keep going like that.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations on that. And all New Yorkers know now you have to be in Brooklyn if you want to stay hip, right?
Yeah, no, our Brooklyn office is lovely. Actually, it's shop front on a leafy street full of brownstones. It's I've been considering going and working out there myself. It's like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. Rachel, well, hey, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us and the audience that we have. It's been a super pleasure. Congratulations on the book. It's fantastic. I encourage everybody to read it. It's a pretty easy read and very entertaining. And, you know, it's summertime. I think it's a good book. I think it actually has relevance beyond the healing encounter that I think many of the techniques and the just the spirit that's conveyed can be applied in any kind of personal relationship. And so, you know, whether it's with your family members, spouses, kids, all those things are applicable. So you don't have to be an acupuncturist or any kind of healer to appreciate the book. So I think you'll do really, really well with it. I hope to see you. Well, I'll see you at the very latest. I'll see you in October, November when you're out here for symposium. Everybody's looking forward to seeing you then. And please give my regards to Noah. Tell him I said hello.
I will. Thank you so much. This was actually such a fun conversation.
Oh yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
You were the president of Pacific College when I went through Pacific College. There's something kind of lovely about chatting all these years later. You remember me when I was in OM1.
Yes, I do. Yeah, well, you were a star then too.
I was taught by the lovely Alex Tippery at OM1, and as you know, I dedicated this book to him. I'm very grateful.
I got to say, we were really touched by that. We miss him every day, but what a treasure he was to have in our lives.
Yes, fabulous practitioner.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Jill.
Thank you.
Have a good week. We'll see
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.